Captain.
Miles. What's up, brother? Great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I've enjoyed our initial
talks. You provoked me to think differently and pulled me, cajoled me, pushed me in different directions. And so I want to share you with the audiences at large, but I want to keep this as informal and real. I need you to get out of your head. I need you to shake your politeness, and I need you to keep it real with me. Are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you, sir. Let's get after it. 3-part signature question. If you forget any of it, ask me. I'll remind you, as I forget a lot.
Yeah.
But sir, who are you? Who have you been? And most importantly today, the man you're building, the man you're becoming.
No, thanks. And Miles, incredible question. I loved it the first time you mentioned it. And I have to say again, in the book of Exodus, there's Moses is talking to God, and God said, "Hey, Moses, head out to head down to Egypt and free my people." And Moses says, "Well, who should I say sent me?" Right? And God says, basically, tell them the great I am. Tell them I am sent you, which is a strange grammatical concept in English, and so the whole notion of I exist, I am everything, I am the culmination of all things, and I think that if we're made in God's image, then maybe that way we all become that, because as Ralph Ellison said early in the intro to the Invisible Man, he talked about history, and our history always stays with us. And I'd have to answer that, like, who are you? The culmination of all of this stuff, everything that's happened so far, which is, and that's casting off the labels of husband and, warrior and commander and father and son and brother, which all certainly apply. But everything, that I am now, it's a culmination of everything that I've experienced and I've remembered and taken up and been carved by over 66 years. So yeah, I know it's tough to say. It's just tough to say, but that's who I am. And I've been for many years a husband and a father and a son and a brother and a SEAL commander and I just finished concrete, and so I'm a concrete finisher, and I mowed lawns and all this different things. So all again, the whole combination of things. But I spent 28 years in the Navy, and loved every job I had. It was one of the singular shapers of who I was, and so I've been a Navy captain and walked out of the Navy and became not a teacher but played one on TV kind of quality. But I taught for 10 years and learned how to teach by jumping in the saddle of a strategic leaders course for Naval Special Warfare for our partner nation military officers, senior military officers, diplomats, and government officials of our partner nations. So no U.S. students. And I taught strategic thinking for 10 years. That's shaped made me think a lot about the world around us. And if you really want to get good at something or learn something, you teach it, right? Because it forces you to have something to say at Monday at 8:00. What are you going to say to these people, right? That's worth them being there. And then in this case, of course, they'd left their family, they left their troops, they'd left their country to come to the States and go through this course. So, one of my Master Chief, fantastic Master Chiefs and I, who who ran the course, we committed every day. Every day has to be worth your time. And so that drove a lot of introspection, a lot of, curious questioning about what we were teaching, about current events, that sort of stuff. And so it kind of keeps you on your toes when you have to deliver, and you've got to deliver every day. We taught, basically the thing was, 6 hours a day of teaching. And so that, it keeps you on your toes. And so I've been all of those things, and born in Illinois, 3 kids, fantastic artists in different fields. And they're one of our qualifying attributes in the house is, would you survive by yourself on the Serengeti one night? Do you have the capacity to do that? It's just kind of a fun, that dude over there, I don't think he'd survive. The kids say that, right? So we have that kind of, would you survive? You have your wits about you, or can you operate cleanly? And on top of that, are you able, my son's in film. Another daughter is going to school for fine arts, and my oldest daughter works for home base up there, which I know we'll talk about later, up in Boston. But she's an artist. She paints, she draws, other things, and so we have this kind of atmosphere in the house of you have to be able to operate, and cleanly, stainless steel execution, as we say. And then this other thing that enriches our lives and helps us see things in new lights is the whole idea of being an artist. So, a teacher, a father, a husband. My wife's very creative, especially in very analytical ways, which is interesting. She's 10 times smarter than I am, and so that's who I've been. And now it's 2026. And I'm 66 years old, which seems incredible. So now you got to become something else, because, there's still time left, right? You still have to show up tomorrow, right? You still have to deliver. And so I did that 10 or 12 years of since retirement of mostly teaching that course. Wound up last September, and I left the course because at some point you need new ideas. And so I left the course last September, and now I work up at St. Benedict's preparatory school in Newark, New Jersey. I work remotely, and I travel up from Norfolk here every couple of months, and as a strategic advisor to the head of school, Father Leahy, and it's a fantastic thing to get attached to contribute to be part of. It's an incredible story, and I encourage everybody that listening out there in Radio Land, let's say, to check out St. Benedict's online. It's an incredibly powerful story, and they're building an incredible future for education in Newark, and that's really exciting. So I again, I'm in education. I think most of our philosophers from the Greek Isles would say, teaching is the most noble profession, and I agree with that. I think it is. I'm not really a teacher, but I'm involved in that mix of things. And then art, I paint, and I like to say I'm a hell of an artist and a pretty good painter, right? I mean, there's a difference. My brother's an incredible painter, and so it's something I'm working on. But it's something I think the creative impulse is such that no matter what you do creatively, that you feel that gives your life meaning, you have to do it. You don't have the option not to do it. You're going to create, you're going to doodle, you're going to do something. whether you sell it, whether you give it away, whether you stack it in the attic, doesn't matter. You burn it, to cook hot dogs, you're going to create, you're going to paint. So I'm going to paint regardless of what the end state of that stuff is. It's just it's just fantastic. So I'm becoming, I think, a better citizen every day. I aspire to that. I'm not sure and I'm not sure I'm meeting, I think we need good citizens. And I aspire to be one who contributes, who does the right thing, who performs, who contributes, who listens and tries to improve their understanding of the country, the mechanism, this whole democracy thing, this democratic republic that we're in. And then not just that, but then we take care of our neighbors. I just saw this. I just saw the Odyssey last weekend, and often it came up, the law of Zeus. I've read the Iliad. It's a depressing book. We talked about that over an adult beverage, but the Odyssey I've not read it yet, so of course I've got to read it, and I picked out a translation that works for me. But this whole notion in the movie, it kept coming up with, and no spoilers here, but just this whole notion of the law of Zeus, of treating someone else the way you want to be treated. It was kind of the basic, that kept coming up. But incredible movie. I recommend you all, if you've got a chance to see it in IMAX, I'd recommend that, because it's shake your seat, kind of stuff, and it's big, and grand. And but that whole notion of taking care of your neighbors. I come from the Midwest, and I think there's a real, that's always the part that you fly over. That's called the flyover area. You go from one coast to the other. And Robert Kaplan's a great writer and thinker. He wrote a book called Earning the Rockies. It's a fantastic book. It's kind of like Travels with Charlie, with from Steinbeck, right? This whole day he goes around the country, Kaplan, and talks about what he sees. But the Earning the Rockies things. His dad apparently was a trucker, and there's the whole kind of theme with truckers that to earn the Rockies, you've got to drive through the Midwest, the flatland, the nothing there. You look over the corn, there's nothing left, right? It's just, so I see it very differently. I'm a product of the prairie, and as Willa Cather says, it's easy to love the mountains. It takes a soul to love the prairie. Right? Yeah, it is fantastic. So I hang on to that. But the prairie is beautiful in its own way. But there's a whole notion out there of pioneers, of taking care of your neighbor, because they're going to have to take care of you at some point. And I think that's an incredibly useful way for us to think about living in a country of our size and our population, whether you live close by people or apart. Taking care of your neighbor is just, I think, a way of being a good citizen. So I aspire to be a good neighbor, and a great artist, a great painter. And I want to dive into education and support St. Benedict's and their vision for developing in the formation of our youth. And so so that's who I'm becoming, I think, artist, contributor to education, person, and citizen. And always, of course, you want to fine tune your skills of being a husband and a father, a brother, and a son. And I think all that stuff's always in progress. It's always in progress. It's never finished, right? The Japanese thing, the ENSO, ENSO, I think is a Japanese word for circle, I think, is a broken circle. And it's an element in Zen calligraphy that basically the idea is you have to accept imperfection, the existence of imperfection, and the broken circle, the unfinished circle, is also communicates to you this acceptance of not only imperfection, but also of growth. You're never finished. Every day you get, as we talked just a minute ago, we woke up vertical again. God bless America, right? And and so we got another chance to get it more right again today, and then tomorrow's going to be the same thing. So I think that's who I'm becoming. I'm an aspirational human.
Yes.
At the end of the day.
So some feedback, if I may.
Yeah, that was a lot. I'm out of breath, by the way.
Perfect. No, you did great. You shared two words that resonate loudly with me on a variety of levels. You said, I am. And now I'm going to share with you, you are. You are, in the best possible way, enigmatic. You are a poet warrior. I experience you as a faith keeper, a healer. I use the word healer before warrior. Yeah. I think that's going to be your biggest resonance, whether it's through art or through the writing or through touching others. You're definitely a protector. That comes by nature of your training and your operation, but you're also a sage, which leads me to wonder deeply about how you became the way you are. The underpinning to all this, which I find remarkable, is the level of humility that permeates through you and outwardly to us, which with the credentials you have isn't something I would have naturally pinned. So I am deeply appreciative of that.
Well, I tell you, I'll speak to that real quick.
Please.
The humility thing, is this notion, of course, and I think it comes to all of us. Once you start digging into things, you go, "Oh my gosh, it's full of stars!" Right? This whole idea that it's huge, and we don't know enough. And it kind of, it doesn't make you nice. It may make you kind, but the humility isn't. Again, it's polite. No, I have respect for people and their time. It's not politeness; it's respect, really. And this humility thing is you start to understand once you've walked so far, 66 years, how little you, and I know this is cliche. I know it is. How little you know. And so there's this great, I don't know if you've probably read it, it's early in the book. I don't know, maybe the introduction of Talib's Black Swan. Right?
I've read it.
Okay. So in the beginning of the book, he says that the number of unread books in your library is more important than the number of books you've read, which is great for me because I use that term with my wife Martha all the time. It gives me credit for why I have so many books that I haven't read, and he says it's because it's about intellectual curiosity. It's a sign of curiosity. It's a sign of intellectual humility. You walk through a bookstore. I know that you experience the same thing because you're very, very curious. And you walk through and I go, I want to know about that thing, whatever that, and you look at it and you page through it, the whole thing. I want to know about this thing. And I'm attracted to this body of knowledge in this book or this, facet on the human experience or whatever it is. And you buy it. And it's not, I bought it, I'm done. I can just put it on the shelf and it looks good when people come over, right? That's not the thing. So anyway, I like Talib's thing. I like that idea that it's really a sign of intellectual maturity, I think. And I don't mean, there we go, of understanding that you don't know what you could know tomorrow, right? You don't know that. And there's more to see about this thing. And this idea of curiosity, if we're not curious, dead, we're just dead, right? And so I like to think of myself and humility in that regard, just because I know how much is left to do, to read, to understand, to people to meet, right? mean,
Gus, is this innate or something that's learned? Your disposition?
I don't know. My mother bought us. I credit her with curiosity, right? She bought us books when we were just like a lot of kids, we had our BB guns outside and screwed around. You know what I mean? On our bikes till the street lights came on, all that kind of stuff way back when. We read some, but it was more about this bookcase of stuff and encyclopedias, right? If I might date myself. And there was everything, imaginable in there. Even monsters, I just think about, I had this thing in class that I used to use to talk about curiosity. And I said, well, you're 5 years old and you're standing in front of a dark room, in the door of a dark room, right? Now, what do you imagine's in there? And these are all senior officers and diplomats and, 1-stars or whatever. And to a person, it's el monstro, or it's monsters.
Of course.
Universal, right?
Yeah.
People come back with that answer. And then you're 35 years old, standing in front of a dark room, in the door of a dark room. You can't see in there. Now what's your imagination telling you, right? What's your curiosity? Yeah. And so this whole notion, this is really about imagination. I said, now at 35, you're saying, well, there's a piece of furniture, there's a Lego on the floor, right? And our imaginations tend to narrow, right? Just out of experience. And I used to tell my class, I said, look, in the executive summary of the 9/11 report, what was the primary failure of 9/11? Right? In the executive summary, the thing our government printed, right, was a failure of imagination. It wasn't, we didn't coordinate enough, or we didn't have our intelligence wired. We didn't tell people this or that early enough. It was a failure of imagination. That was our primary failure. We knew it was possible. We'd seen them in Africa. We said the Bohinca plot, and in the Philippines. Be aware of those things. Would we imagine they would do that sort of thing? What was our imaginations? So our imaginations are ability to be curious. I think my mother was probably cultivated that as much as anybody. Yeah,
you're blessed. Curiosity, imagination. I'm a fierce defender of the humanities, especially today with AI and deep fakes. I just want to celebrate that intangible quality that happens when you spitball an idea and you wake up in the middle of the night like, oh, I got it. Or you're out on a run and it just comes to you. You don't know how. You hear about the musician where the music flows through them. They don't know why.
Mozart.
And right? Exactly. Linda Perry talks about it a lot as a music producer for many of the great hits. Which brings me to the description that I love to use for you as the poet warrior, not to be cliche. So I'd like to turn the dial back a moment. I'd like to teleport us to 2000, the year 2000. And here's Gus. Active duty, full career under the way, heavy lift. Sir, what is going on that year that put a brush in your hand instead of simply a pen?
I was the XO of a team. I was the executive officer of a SEAL team. And true to any unit, it doesn't matter what service, the number two person, guy or gal, it doesn't matter. But the executive officer takes care of the day-to-day stuff. And once you've been in that position, you understand exactly what that means. The pipes break, it's yours. Somebody didn't show up for work. Somebody gets robbed. So, this doesn't happen. Somebody gets hurt. Everything that happens with people, places, and things, that's yours. You own it. You have to deal with that and plug the dike and the whole thing. So that's a daily and something new every day. And so you have a wonderful staff typically, and it's your job to figure out how to support the staff organize things, organize efforts, such that you deal with the 10,000 things that happen at any organization, and certainly in the teams. And so I had that kind of job. You go early and you come and you get home late, and you deal with all kinds of stuff, and a lot of stuff that doesn't get resolved right away. You can't just say fix that or do this or call that person in. Or these are problems that persist for a while. So you're under the anxiety of that thing, until it continually for a while. So anyway, I was the XO. I was on a trip, and my wife, we had 3 kids at the time, and so she was driving around and recognized that I'm gone, but my birthday is tomorrow, and she's trying to figure out. She had 3 kids in the car. I think all 3 of them were sick at the same time. So she's in the store, hauls them in the store, hauls them back in and sees this small sign that says art classes. And it's local, and it's just in a strip mall kind of thing, but a really neat experience. But she pulls the tab, gets the phone number, calls them. Yes, come by. We'll give you a gift certificate. And so I get a gift certificate for my birthday for art class, for a watercolor class. And I'd always been a doodler, always doodling and, drawing stuff. And so it wasn't like it was a cold start, but I took this watercolor class, and we're near Newport News and Hampton, and I can't remember exactly where Miss Bryant was from, but Kobe Bryant's aunt was my watercolor teacher. Yeah. And I don't know if I was smart enough to know who Kobe Bryant was. I think he was probably emerging as a star at the time, but she was just fantastic. And she got me started doing watercolors. And so I started out with watercolors. Watercolors are hard. I find them hard. I paint mostly in oils now for a lot of reasons, but watercolors are hard. And at some point, I continued it. It was great therapy for me. It was a great, being able to express yourself and pour yourself into something that takes you from, you're in one spot. You could get into this whole different environment, this whole different existence while you're painting. And I took another couple of classes on the way, and pretty soon, as I always said, you stop throwing things away, and you get to a point where well, that's pretty nice. I think we may keep that one. The whole thing. It's like a fish of a certain size. So we're going to keep this. And so we kept them, and I deployed a couple of times after 9/11, and come back with pictures, and I started to paint from those pictures, and I've got some early paints I think that were worth keeping, and I painted a couple overseas while I was there. So, in our downtime, the little quiet times that you find almost in any environment, you find little quiet time. But that became a very, I think, welcome source of nourishment, I guess, replenishment, and so I basically, it was so useful for so long that I got to a point where I felt good enough that I enjoyed it. And I always say about golf, I didn't have enough beginner's luck at golf to become a golfer. You know what I mean? And so, but this was, it wasn't a lot, but just, it was so good, no matter how bad or good the painting or the picture was or whatever you were doing. It was so nourishing that you just stayed with it. And pretty soon, over time, like most things, you get a little better at it. So that was my track into being a painter. And I think, painters and artists are 2 different things, and they're all kinds of art. I happen to paint, but there's, theater and dance, and, film and all kinds of things, and certainly sculpture. And, but I think I think, I even have a very, a perspective on work as being, there's an art to this. There's an art to being a good mechanic, and there's an art to being a good carpenter. And and a host of things, computer programmers or whatever, whatever's out there, dealing with people at a cash register. There's an art to that, right? Some people do it very, very well, and some people, you can't wait to get away from them, right?
Yes.
I mean, right? And some of them you just have enjoyed this 45 seconds that you're dealing with somebody, and they've had an ability to say, I'd like to know that person better. You learn their name, and pretty soon you see them maybe next time. That's an art, I think. And so I think that the idea of being an artist is one thing, and then what you apply that to, whether you're a mechanic or a plumber, you keep awns, you raise kids, whatever you do, you're a doctor, certainly. I think there's a difference between being an artist and being a thing, a painter or whatever. And so I think that was kind of my walk into that world. And it's something you stick in your kit bag, something I like doing. It's just so nourishing. I'm going to keep doing this. And so I think that's why it's stuck.
Well, what a profound point of view, and a lesson for many to accept the messaging here of just create. Don't worry about the cause. Forget about the why. Lean into the what, and have the consistency in doing it because it just feels good and it's productive and it's healthy and it's safe.
And use different parts of your brain, and so you're lighting up your brain in different ways. We've already, there's a new field of neuroscience called neuroaesthetics. It's a very exciting field. Yeah, it's fantastic. And it was a gentleman, a Dr. Chatterjee, who runs the center up at UPenn. And we used to have him come to the course, and he was fantastic about explaining what our noggins do, what's going on inside there, what the gray matter does when we engage with art or beauty or pleasure and those sorts of things. More cognitive awareness, which is very important for warriors these days. But that whole notion of understanding the why we're attracted to art, why it was good for us, why it's nourishing for us as humans, body, mind, and spirit. And there's something magical about working with your hands. We have lots of nerves in our hands. And so your tactile employment, your hands on things, and connects so closely to your brain, to your cognition, that it's very interesting science. And this you hear people all the time say, well, if I could only get my hands on it, if I could get my hands on it, I could figure it out, right?
Yes.
So our brains, we have these, if our fingers are our extension of our brain in some regard, right? Our eyes are part of our brain, how we perceive the world. It's just feeding this thing. And so this whole idea of art as cognitive nourishment is I think that's a very exciting thing to think about. Absolutely.
Let's lean in on that. Let's jump ahead 3 years from 2000. We're going to jump to 2003 now. And I'm going to take you to Camp Lemonnier, if I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah, Lemonnier.
Lemonnier.
That's how we'd say it in the Midwest. We'd say Lemonnier. But Lemonnier, yeah.
So the same stretch of time that you're painting, you're commanding, you're operating, you're protecting, you're doing all that stuff. You're writing haiku about an embassy garden and a poem about kids playing with tumbleweeds made of plastic bags, and a raw love letter to someone called M. So same deployment, 3 completely different registers.
Yeah.
Tell me what that year was doing to you.
It was, well, here again, I was in my first time over, was part of a unit that I joined over there, a joint unit, and I was the chief of staff. Again, the XO, right, at this point. And we had operational units in the whole thing. And again, chief of staff's job to make sure the command element operates in a way that supports the operators out there in the field. And the better you do that, of course, the more effective they are. So, everybody's job's important. So I was in East Africa at the base of old, I think it was an old Foreign Legion base. We inhabited it, and we were in tents and the whole thing for early on in 2003 and then 4. I did 2 different tours there, in 2 different capacities. But yeah, so but you find little respites, little little packages of time to do what you want to do, to heal, to rest, to relax, write letters home, all these things. And art is an expression. Basically, it's an expression of the abstract, right? That you're giving form to the abstract. That's what art's all about. And so, painting, these ideas, and art connects us to big ideas, abstract ideas, and so the poem thing, I was pretty good at rhymes and at unstructured poems. I could rhyme, I could come up with words that rhyme and make them work in context, right? That doesn't make me a poet, but it's like, I'm not a golfer, but I've golfed before, right?
Right.
I'm not really a poet because iambic pentameter, I can say it, but being able to explain it's another thing. Mary Oliver had a great book about rules for the dance, I think it's called. It's a fantastic book about writing poetry. But I didn't get that till late. But your ability to express yourself in some form, mostly unstructured verse, as they say. The haiku thing, I spent my first 2 years in the Navy in Japan, and certainly we all know about haiku and the 575 thing or what, and we all get that, but you come out of Japan with not the same person, I think, because you're marked by this now. You see the depth of their culture and how their culture shapes their behaviors, which is an incredible thing. I haven't figured that out about Americans yet, other than roping cattle. I don't know what to say. But you have a real respect for that, and you want to be true to the form. And so we were in Djibouti, and we'd go into town outside the wire, go into town during the day for different reasons, the embassy or whatever, and you'd see these kids. You'd drive, you drive the vehicles, and you'd stop at a stop sign, and these, like they would in New York, with spraying your windshield, and they used to in New York, or at least that was the urban, whatever. I don't know if it happens anymore, but hey buddy, can we clean your windshield? And these kids were young kids, and could maybe reach your side window. They couldn't reach across the entire car. They were small or young, and they didn't have. They had a rag and a can for coins, and that's all they had. There was no water, right? I mean, they didn't walk around with a jug of water. They weren't prepared, and no Windex and nothing like that, right? It was just a rag and a can for coins, and it just occurred to me as I saw one about this. I just left the embassy. The embassy's, of course, isn't it's plush in relative to the outside environment. It's plush. They have plants and things, and Djibouti's pretty desolate for most of it, right? And volcanic, kind of landscape. And anyway, it just, it's just one of those things that attaches itself to, and you have to talk about it, and you've got to express it in some way. And so, being able to make rhymes and being able to understanding some basics about haikus, how many syllables you get in each line, but you having to being able to express what you saw through some format. I found that very satisfying. It's very satisfying, and haikus are efficient little glimpses of your experience, and they're very, very. I mean, you get to the point, and you make some sort of counter view, and then you kind of bring it back together, and it was just a great way. So anyway, that was satisfying to do. The unstructured verse just pours out of you, and you've got to make it such that it I think it's interesting to listen to. And I think it's true about all art. Art is not complete. It's still art, but it's not complete until it's shared.
Wow. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I think, art is art. It can be a painting, and it's still a painting, and that's a piece of art, but it's not complete until it's shared. I think there's a transfer of energy between the artist and the viewer or the listener that takes place. And unless you do that transfer of energy, art has, what's the purpose? Unless people see it, unless it's your own healing, of course. But I think it's certainly art, but it's not complete until it's shared. That's when it reaches its fullest sense of itself. So haiku, I just enjoyed doing that, pushing it through a form, making it, contorting your ideas, your thoughts, your memory there, and your experience into this form. Japanese is, Japan is full of forms and sculptures. The do, like judo, the do is Tao, like the way, right? Like Tao. That's all the Shidos do. Karate do, judo, right? Chado is the tea ceremony. So it's the way of tea. So you have this whole idea. This is the way of this haiku thing. Of course, this is how you express yourself. This is the form. Like any martial arts has its forms. Haiku is a way of expressing yourself in a form, and the form is there to make sure that you're expressing this in very, very clear, concise terms. And the other couple of poems that you mentioned were, I've written about 20, I think, or maybe 15 something when I was there over time, unstructured verse, but it felt better to me as an American, kind of, as a kind of, hey man, I'm just going to say it how I want to say it. Almost like rappers, I'm just going to say it this way. And so it was an ability to express yourself. And I think that's very sustaining when you're in places like that, where you're in environments or in situations where whatever's in your rucksack is not going away soon. And being able to express yourself in some way is very sustaining in that regard. So I think those poems probably helped me do that. And of course, they're fun to have now, looking back and thinking about them.
Yeah. Gus, your operating system is so unique to me. It's definitely not conditional, and it's 100% open sourced, as they like to say, which is absolutely epic. I want to lean into your operating source and your ideologies deeper, and I want to ask about the overarching human capital thesis. But before I get into that human capital ideology, I want to ask about 3 things that you wrote. We'll tackle them one at a time. In 2002, correct me if I'm mistaken, you wrote that our real advantage isn't the platform, it's the people. What was the reaction inside the Navy when that was published?
I would say pressurized silence, I think. You could tell it was out there, right? I maybe got a couple, incited a couple of, and I don't know reaction to the writing itself. Who knows? It's hard to say. But what I do know is when you go to any fora at the time, and we were, it was supercharged environment, of course, after 9/11, and we needed incredible technologies, and everybody was thinking about, the next 6 months, and how do we get this, and we created organizations to build countermeasures to IEDs, right? I mean, and that turned around quickly, JIATO, and so they pulled this stuff together to deal with the technological advantages we could afford our troops, because you can't reform the troops, because you start to throw technology at them and hope that the troops are, capable, which they of course they are, of being creative with the stuff, and it can make it successful, and the whole thing, but you could feel the sentiment in the Navy and the Air Force, are very platform centric services. They're about platforms. I would like to think that we're moving out of it, but that was the issue that I saw, and mostly from my Navy experience. Yeah, we took care of people and, the crew and the whole thing, but it was about the platform. Ships, right? Aircraft. And the ships are floating monuments that have a name that's tied to, the USS Ticonderoga or whatever, right? They're tied to historical things or personalities that were important in the Navy. I was on the USS Lockwood. Lockwood was an incredible submariner in World War II. Dignitaries and the whole thing. But you get, they're monuments to things, right? And you think about that, floating monuments to last 50 years in a world that turns over. My printer is too old. I've had it for 4 years, right? I mean, that kind of thing. And so in a world that's changing that fast, and technology is changing, and the criteria is changing, and whole operating systems are changing. Not just the employable technologies, but the operating systems are changing. Now we're going to AI. So we had a Navy that was, I thought, not in a good spot to keep up with the challenges we had right after 9/11. The way to get there in my book is about, okay, you invest in the people. Right? And of course, you're plugging holes with technology, but you've got to invest in people. People are going to get you there. Get the right people in the right places at the right time. And your chances of success are bigger. It's expensive. People are expensive, right? They just are. You got to feed them. Sometimes they become the limiting factor, because you got to feed them. You got to have a place for them to, to hit the head. You got to have a place for them to sleep. You got to have you can't put them in any environment. You have to have environments for them that they can exist and sustain and perform at a high level. That's expensive. Autonomous vehicles we have today, that sort of thing, are not autonomous, but unmanned systems we have today, have taken the human out of the execution part, on the tactical execution, and we're back here. You start to take the human out of the tactical action, and you can go a long way in space without oxygen, right? You don't need all this stuff. You don't need a bathroom. You don't need a way to eat. You don't need all this stuff. You can do a lot of things. Same thing on Earth. You can do a lot of things without a human having to have the systems in place to support human life. And so, it lightens aircraft and all this different stuff. So I think, people saw eventually that humans were the limiting factor in things, and technologies could do a lot more without the human at the tactical action end. But anyway, I think for us, a lot of lessons I thought were valuable were how we develop, how we create, how we employ humans. And the OSS was one of those in World War II. The precursor of the CIA and special forces and the soft community really was the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, for the commandos, right? Those inglorious bastards, I think, from the OSS, right? But anyway, right. This idea that people could actually make create exponential advantages by the things that they could do, engaging with people and places and things in creative ways. And so that was the tenor among that article. It was unspoken pressure. The pressure was there because I could feel it in every meeting I went to, that sort of thing. So that was for that specific article. It was kind of you could still feel the pressure of not knowing what else to do except build stuff. Yeah.
And I'm reading through everything you sent to me, and I look at you. You're all of it. And as an author, you're like a prize fighter. I experience you as jab, jab, knockout. And so that was the left. Yeah. That was the left jab. Then in 03, you come with the right jab, where you go a little bit further. Same concept, but you write to the extent that let's recruit physically disabled sailors for their intellectual and leadership capital. And then you go further to talk about Nelson, i.e. one arm, one eye, and Bader, no legs. And you're writing a similar argument now twice, which is our real advantage isn't the platform, it's the people. So I experienced that as a jab, jab. And then in 09, you come through with the knockout punch, in my opinion, my words, not yours. And that's where you wrote the most profound thing that I had to reflect on it, and I had to look up, and I'm like, what is this guy getting after here? And you write, is a Navy without ships still a Navy? So give me the plain language of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, it ended up at that point of if you start to look at unmanned systems was kind of the driver of that notion. And but if we have visibility, awareness, and the ability to maneuver with unmanned systems or with other systems, cyber, whatever, take your pick, and have effects on the battlefield without moving ships from one point to the other. I just questioned the idea that ships were the best capabilities. Ships, I mean, largely, ships and submarines and the whole thing. But is that the best way, the most efficient way, most effective way of controlling the seas? And I wanted to question that, and so I just kind of dug into that idea and looked at different things we were or weren't doing in the Navy, and some things about the Navy didn't seem efficient, of course, right? And that's true of any large organization. Nothing special there with the Navy. I just happen to be in the, looking from the inside out on that one. But it's this whole notion about with unmanned systems and satellites, low orbit satellites, which we knew were coming, right? What can't we see now in 2026? Well, what you can see everything almost, and certainly with Starlink. I mean, that's but our ability to start to see things, awareness, was much bigger than and pervasive than World War II. And so I started questioning, okay, are ships the best thing, or is it a combination of other stuff? So if it's not ships, John Keegan wrote The Price of Admiralty. I'm a big John Keegan fan, and he in the book basically, it's just spoiler alert. Don't listen if you haven't read it. He just said, he basically gets to the point where he says, hey, submarines are the future. That's where you're going to have advantage, because ships are going to be seen. They're going to be out. They're out in the open, for goodness sakes, right? So his idea was, submarines are really the future, and I think you saw that from World War II. They're incredible capacities in World War II. But yeah, so if ships aren't the most effective thing, then how do you define a navy? If you find yourself, ships are great. They kind of say Navy to us when they come, pouring into Fleet Week in New York. It says Navy. I live in Norfolk, the largest naval base in the world. And when you drive by the piers, you see the carriers are in, or something huge, these huge things that we built, incredible military capabilities, sitting there next to the pier. It's wildly impressive. And kind of overwhelming in some respect. But to start thinking about warfare in different terms, if you think about cyber, and you think about unmanned vehicles, and you think about satellites and low Earth orbit, and you think about space, no gravity or friction, right? You get into these things, and pretty soon, again, just to throw the idea out there that, would you be willing to say ships are no longer the best thing for controlling the seas? Would you be willing to say that if it was true? Right. And that's not just capability for the Navy. That's identity. We say, identity is the last citadel before the soul. And so, you threaten someone's identity, you're in for a fight. Right. So I think the Navy's maybe not willing to take it to that level. Horse cavalry was kind of the, right, World War I, right? Nobody wanted to give up horses. I mean, not the cavalry. And then World War I, somebody snuck one of those Maxim machine guns onto the battlefield, and all of a sudden, horse cavalry didn't have a chance. And we recreated it cavalry with Sikorsky and the helicopters and the whole thing later. That's air cat, man. Right? And so.
Well, to your point, I've heard from good authority that there aren't as many billets going out for sniper school anymore because of all the autonomous work. So this natural selection and the evolution, it's a process. And I think that process comes back to something that you're leaning on, which is great design. At least that's my takeaway. Unmanned systems, warfare of the future, personnel of the future, this deep thinking, which wraps up for me into this poet warrior concept. And while we talked about painting and haiku and art and do, which I appreciate, it all comes back to this through line, which is really, what is great design? And perhaps you could define it for us. Great design to you in a painting, in a curriculum, in a battle plan. What do they all have in common?
Certainly effective. Rothko, right? You look at a Rothko painting, and I've seen one, and it's all about standing in front of one. And the colors and the combination of colors of a Rothko painting. It's not about. They're a great example of great design, because they're so simple, right? There's no it just digs right into the emotion of the person, efficiently. But I think great design has to be effective with its objective, or why was it designed? It has to be effective. And you can be very artful about that. But I think great design also doesn't create its own obstacles to our engagement with it. It doesn't do that. You don't make it hard to use the thing that you've created, right? Your mere presence, your mere attachment with the thing, it's intuitive. You give a kid an Xbox controller or something, or a phone or something, pretty soon they're starting to figure out what buttons to push for certain things without any instruction. That kind of just starts to happen. We've seen that. So it's that the design doesn't create obstacles to my engagement with this thing, my use of it, or my interaction with this thing. And I think it it's effective. It doesn't create obstacles on its own accord. It's effective, and I think it has to be inspiring. Great design has to inspire. It has to make us think, and not just think about. If you think about architecture and those, what does that make us think about? How does that push us on forward? And a great design, no matter what it is, I think it has to have that kind of trajectory, that kind of I don't know what to say, that kind of push. Not just you get wrapped up in the design itself, in and of itself. What can I do with this thing? What is it inspiring me to do or to be? The to do verb or the to be verb. And I think, so it has to be inspiring too. What else could I do with this thing? Or what's the next iteration of this thing? Great design does that. Because that's how it keep itself, keep itself alive. It gets just to wonder what's next. What's the next attribute of this thing that I can apply but I think that's part of it. The inspiration, it's got to be effective. It's got to not create its own obstacles. And I think
let me ask you this question to that point.
Yeah.
Does the same design principle that you're sharing hold true in the classroom? And my thought, and the reason I'm asking that is, you're at St. Benedict's with kids, and you're also with Chicago police captains. So is great design resonating with both of them? And are you measuring different things than you measured a sailor or a operating teammate?
Yeah, I think the design certainly applied. And design is, maybe this is another attribute, but this holistic nature of design and education, let's say, or training, that development or formation. I like the word formation because it's very holistic. How you design the school, how you design the environment, or how you design your interaction with the environment that you have. Those kind of things you can control. At St. Benedict's, the staff there is incredible. I'm just fortunate enough to be involved with this, the group there and the vision they have for well, I call it formation, body, mind, and soul. And how you do all that, and at St. Benedict's, we're relooking the curriculum. I'm the dean of strategic initiatives or something like that, I think, and I call it the Father Edwin, and Father Ed, as he's known, the head of school, and he said that I'm the dean of now, next, and later. So thinking about this, but what's next, and then where is this leading, and that sort of thing. But I think design of the environment, the information that's put out, design of formation, holistic formation of young people, is what school is. And with the advent of AI, the searches and all this stuff, our ability to our phones, it's not about knowledge. Education is not about knowledge. It's no longer about, I just memorized 1, 2, or 3. So what? Unless that changes who you are, how you think. I got all the historical facts in the phone, right? I can get through that baby, right? I carry this thing, and so we have the ability to accumulate knowledge, access to knowledge is not the thing about it. It's about the formation of the human, right? All aspects of the human. And St. Benedict is a great example of design in that it's effective. It's certainly inspirational. Yeah, we're human, so we create obstacles we don't even know we're creating. But they have the ability, the built-in ability to change, and so they get past the obstacle thing. And I think they're continually like these two questions we're asking now: what in the 21st century, what should young people be learning? And the second is, how might they best learn it? And St. Benedict has been very, very forward on experiential learning. And it's all about learning, not about knowledge, not about teaching or educating, right? And it's about learning. So they do a wide variety of experiential activities at St. Benedict. One, they Appalachian Trail, and they have a water challenge that's run by a SEAL and a whole thing. And so they have incredible opportunities that they've built for, I think, the most effective formation of humans out there. They're a great example of education in the 21st century that's going to evolve and adapt to continue to get better. So that idea of it's an inspiring to better. What's the next iteration? What else do we need to change? And so that's St. Benedict. It's just a fantastic place, and I'm very privileged to be just a small, I row somewhere in the boat. I help row the boat. And then the Policing Leadership Academy, PLA, University of Chicago, is a program that seminar-based program that gathers some of the most challenging or leaders, law enforcement leaders from some of the most challenging precincts in the nation, brings them together, and not only, again, it's not just professional development, but they what are you doing? This, best practices are certainly exchanged. They create a network out of these groups, these cohorts of law enforcement leaders, and so I'm privileged there to give a half day module on strategic thinking about how you start to think about your world, and so that's their design matters, not only in the presentation or that, but where have they been in the last several weeks, getting to the point I show up in front of that shaping, right? That shaping before where I am in the lineup, so to speak. Hey, guess we want to be close to the end, and so that the idea that you're shaping, and then they throw Gus in there, and it's okay. I want you to think about your world differently, because the world's a complex place. It changes every day, and I always say, the reason I know the world changes, and I know you know that too, because when we go on break, what's the first thing you're going to do when you go on break? You're going to pop your phone out and see how your world's changed. And the world you care about, family, world outside the house, whatever. You're going to check in with your world and see how it's changed. Just in the time of our little module. But those are environments where I get to contribute, and man, it's very, very satisfying for me to do that.
Yeah, Gus, after your module, the first thing I do on break isn't go to my phone. I hunt you down, I corner you, and I pepper you with so many questions you're dizzy. That's what I do.
That's funny. Yeah.
Because my phone can wait another hour, but I don't get another hour with you. But all joking aside, you're talking about human-centered design, and you're talking about experiential design. And I find those both remarkable. I'm a big fan of biomimicry. It informs a lot of what I do. I look to Frank Lloyd Wright for inspiration, and Buckminster Fuller. And both of those inform me very deeply.
Right.
And so, having shared that, I want to ask a very sincere question, and it's going to be a weird question. And then I'll explain why I'm asking it after you answer it. Are you an old soul?
No, I don't want to be an old soul. An old soul, because I look at that, I call one of my daughters an old soul. She knows who she is. She knows who I'm talking about.
You're attaching a linear answer to this. I'm not talking chronology.
No. No. It's not the to-do verb, right? This isn't about linear stuff. It's not linear shit here. This is the to-be verb.
Exactly. That's
right?
why
you can be an old soul when you're 12. We say that about kids sometimes. You can be an old soul. So what is that? You're thoughtful. You're contemplative. You're whatever.
Your frequency is different. You're receiving. You're outputting the whole nine.
I always joke my wife. I've always made this joke. I don't know if she. I'm the most mature 10-year-old on the planet.
Amen.
Right. And so you wander around and I'm not on here. I'm sure you're not going to, as long as you're not going to show this online, release this is great. But there's an energy I think you have to have. You old souls are, I mean, I'm not disparaging people who have that gravity about them. Because I want to have that notion where that dude, it's always good to have Gus in the boat. It's always good to have Gus along, right? That's a great reputation to have. And I want that. And I want to be, have the gravitas to go, dude, this dude just walked in the room. But I also don't want to feel that internally. That makes sense. Because
I think you can be an old soul and highly energized. I don't think you can be an old soul and be like an antique.
Yeah, maybe so. Temperament, right?
Temperament, disposition, outlook. Old soul to me means there's a depth of understanding.
Yeah.
And an ability to apply it here and, to your point, to the future. Because as you said, history matters. You started off with 2 words, I am. You started off with a discussion about Moses. That's, that's a respect for where I was, but it's informing where I'm going.
Right.
And so that's why I asked that question.
Yeah. I'd like to be known, I think, as maybe an unfinished old soul. I don't know, but who recognizes where, tomorrow requires its effort. There's more to learn. There's certainly a humility to that thing that drives you. But old soul, I guess, is I don't know. I struggle with that. I kind of grind my teeth with that a little bit.
Well, don't, because you'll be at the dentist's office.
Yeah.
don't grind too hard.
Yeah.
So let me suggest this. Let me close the loop here for a moment. So we've covered a lot of ground. I want to take this concept design and I want to apply it directly to today, to a machine, to an output that I know is very important to you. You and I have been back and forth on a couple different numbers. Is it 120? Is it 150,000? Is it 200,000?
Right.
The construct, this design construct, and the machine, it speaks to me because you speak to us about human-centered design. I know you're in a deep study about human potential, about what the warrior of the future may look like, and I'm excited to see what becomes of that Substack article that you're researching. And I won't tip it any further than that. I don't want to reveal. But I do want to ask why it is I bring up whether it's 120,000 or 150,000, and what does that have to do in the context of design, machine, people, potential?
I wrote it down as 125.
125. Why does that number matter?
It matters because that's the amount of 125,000 people veterans have taken their life since 2001. 125,000
have committed suicide. Self-harm since 2001. I'm sorry.
And these are veterans. who, you know, have been often in dynamic circumstances. You'd think you get a little bit hardened, you know, and the crucibles that are out there and the battle space and different things. And certainly, often they are. But I don't want to speak too much about suicides. I'm certainly a layman, but what I see is I think the number is 30,000 of just Afghanistan and Iraq veterans. 30,000 suicides. Those who have participated in the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. And that's something we have to, I think it's extremely important to bring attention to that as often as we can. The idea that I think everyone I know in the teams, in the SEAL teams, knows somebody. And I'm sure this is in the Spec Ops world and outside in the veteran community. They know somebody. I bet almost every operator, male or female, in the teams, likely knows somebody who's taken their own life. I certainly do. My wife and I know too many that we knew, and it's absolutely something we have to. I call it. Of course, it's a very complex problem, and if we could have solved it, we would have already. I think, because we got a lot of smart people out there. So it's one of those things where it's a complex problem we probably cannot solve. It's something, it's like mowing the grass. You have to stay invested. We have to stay invested in this, and we have to pay attention to this. I hope we could solve it, but we're human, and I'm not going to worry about trying to solve it. What I want to do is make sure that we pay attention to it. I think this is a tragedy of our veteran community and our veteran experience, that we have these kinds of numbers that far exceed the civilian population in terms of percentages. And I look at 20 vets a day, and so I think it's always worth our time in forums like this and other places where you get a chance to call attention to that. Just don't forget that we need to invest in keeping as few people as possible from taking their own life. And I think that's something I appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's incredibly important. And as you and I have talked, of course, before, there are many organizations out there, and if I could encourage anyone out there, always reach out. Always reach out. There's plenty of places to call. There's hotlines and everything else. And that's the immediate need is having someone to reach out and hang on to. I think a first step. There's great organizations out there. One is I would like to talk about is called Home Base. It's up in Boston. It's a clinic, a veterans clinic that provides treatment for PTSD, depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, as they say, co-occurring substance abuse. And so they have an incredible clinic in Boston. It's a Red Sox Foundation, Mass General Hospital. They get faculty and research help from Harvard that cares for veterans in this area for those afflictions. And I'd encourage anybody get online if you know somebody, you just want to be informed, you want to be ready to help somebody. Homebase.org, and I think we've got it teed up to share that. They provide clinical, state-of-the-art care, technology, and humans. Just the best combination of people, and many programs for veterans, for families, and I went through an assessment, a 1-week assessment with them, and the nature of this whole experience is that it's very holistic in nature. It's body, mind, and soul, a scan of my cranium was an hour and a half. I don't think I'd ever been through an MRI for that long. But they do very, very great care, great assessments. It's free to all veterans and their families, free of charge, absolutely free of charge. All you have to do is contact them through the website to get started, and they'll host you up there, and they're supported by some great Americans and organizations here, and I would encourage anybody any veteran out there thinks they may benefit, or who thinks their family might benefit by the veteran going through an initial assessment or one of the programs that they'll help you figure out which one to participate in. If you think you would benefit, or someone or your family would benefit by you going through it, I encourage you to do it. I went through the 1-week assessment, and I looked at everything, and it's experts. It's world-class care for veterans, free of charge. Any veteran, any era, any discharge status. So it's homebase.org, and I would encourage everyone to be familiar with it, be prepared to share it as a resource. And for those considering where they are after their veteran experience or active duty experience, their job is to get people back in the fight, back operationally, or for veterans who are retired or left the service, to make sure you can flourish in life outside of the service. So again, I encourage anybody to know what to tell people if they're looking for at least a first step, is to go to the homebase.org.
Homebase.org. We'll include that in the show notes, as well as our social media outlets. Appreciate all that are contributing to that and your advocacy for them. Gus, that brings us to our wrap up, sort of a landing here. An important question to ask.
Have to quit so soon. I've got a lot more to say. What are you talking about?
We're going to have to have a part 2 for sure, because there's a lot we didn't get to that I'm really interested in, starting with the moral economy, among a few other things. But where do you want people to find your work? If they'd like to consult with you, collaborate, perhaps purchase or commission art, or just share some dialogue, where should they look for you?
I'm on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yeah. LinkedIn's like a minivan. Nobody wants a minivan, but they're so practical, right? So nobody wants to be on LinkedIn, but you have to be, right? You just have to be there. So anyway, I'm just kidding. But LinkedIn there, and then I have an art website. I think you're going to share that, I think, as well at some point. And you can contact me through the art website. There's a way to do that, and also it's a sneaky way for me to get you to look at the paintings, right? Awesome. But no, I look forward to any of that. Certainly, if I can be helpful, or if there's fun out there to be had, I'm available. Thanks.
I appreciate you, Gus. I got to put a shout out to Rob for putting us together. It's magnanimous, good people connect other good people. And I appreciate that collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And let me,
it's a great human.
Yeah, for sure. Let me share sort of a concluding thought. Sir, 28 years in the Navy, 3 essays. They all said the same thing in 3 different decades. We've bounced from a haiku about a garden to a love poem written the same week as a strategy memo. Least we not forget 25 lessons for 2 children who don't know how lucky they are to have them, or perhaps they do.
3 kids. 3. But
3.
Yeah.
Thank you. 3.
But thanks for that.
This is precisely why we don't chase guests. We find participants for the podcast who are doing the work quietly and, in my opinion, reshaping the world of design, sport, warfare, code, commerce, and the human spirit. You've done it in 3 uniforms: the Navy, the canvas, and the classroom. And somehow it's the same work every time, arguing in whatever language the room requires that the thing worth protecting was never the ship. It was always the person. We didn't get simply an operator. Today, we got the whole individual, and that is the whole point to this podcast. Friends, family, and cohorts, that is our show, Fight or Flight. We don't chase guests. We find them doing the real work, lessons from a life well lived and applied knowledge. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. No, it's been a pleasure, Miles.
Thanks.